spoke to you before about my other experiences, but I've one about a haunted house a friend of mine lived in a few years back. A bunch of us used to hang out there. He had a lot of bonfires over the summer. The first time I'd ever went there was a few months after he had moved in. I was dating his best friend, and he told me that he thought it was haunted. I in turn did not believe him at first. Then things happened. We were in the kitchen, and all of a sudden, we heard something from the basement, like someone was using a broomstick and hitting the ceiling from the basement. I laughed at first and asked who was down there. Then I saw the look on my friend's face. He was terrified and suggested we go outdoors for a while. While we were outside, I asked what was going on. He said that was the ghost's way of letting him know he was annoyed, so he leaves the premises for a while. I still was skeptical until I looked up and could see into the front door, and standing there in his living room was this old guy who was somewhat glowing. I almost hightailed it out of there when they decided it was safe to go in. I told them I was leaving, and they insisted I go back in, so I did. I then asked my friend if he had ever seen this ghost before, and he said no. I described to him what he looked like, and he looked into the previous owners of the house. Well, it turns out there was a guy who died in that house who looked like the same man I described. I freaked after that, as well as my friend. Things were going good at first. Like every time my friend came back home from work, he would announce himself, and the guy never bothered him anymore. There was always this room upstairs that every time you walked by it, you could feel a cold draft from the door, and it was locked. We never thought anything of it, till the man started to get mad. There were many more parties going on because of the summer. Well, the man seemed to not like the parties, and he started showing himself to me and my friend. I knew he was getting mad, and things got bad when he started attacking my friend at night. He would wake up to slashes across his back. We checked into the history more, and found out that the man was not friendly when he was alive, and worse when he was dead. It did not take long for my friend to move. The beatings were worse by the time he left. Although he never attacked me, I always feel threatened by him. I would wake up to him right in my face, and he would disappear when I would scream. I still think about the horrors that man would do to anyone, and how my friend survived actually being attacked by a ghost. Sometimes I still have dreams about this man, and how he chases people out of the house. To this day, the house is still empty. My name is Billy, and I would like to share a supernatural story of mine. Although my story does not have a physical contact, seeing a ghost, there was definitely something supernatural in the house. It was a few years ago, back in 2001 or 2002 I believe, in Mississauga, Ontario. Mississauga is a fast-growing suburb just outside of Toronto. The place in question was your very typical haunted house on top of a hill surrounded by vast land, which in turn was surrounded by industrial and commercial land. The house was deserted, only of its occupants, as its remains lay trapped behind boarded windows. I know it sounds silly, but that is exactly what it was. That looming house on the hill that every kid stared at as there were parents that drove by. I was one of those kids who, while in the backseat of my parents' car, stared silently at the house as we drove by. But it was more than just the stereotypical view of the house that captured me. There was something there, something odd that pulled me in. It was not until a few years later that I had the guts to go to the house. I had moved away from Mississauga to Toronto, but I never forgot the house. I had always told myself that I would go back, alone, and take photographs of the house. So one day, I grabbed my camera and I headed back to the house. It was early spring, and the leaves have yet to grow on the trees. The house had the most scary driveway I'd ever seen, probably the length of 2 to 3 football fields, and that is no joke. Now, from what I know, the house remained deserted and the land untouched by commercialists. I guess sometime, someone managed to get inside because the roof was burnt completely off. Most of the window boardings were torn down, and the insides of the room were completely overturned and damaged. From the beer cans all over the place, there must have been a party. The property around the house was littered with about 3 to 4 sheds and about 4 to 5 old rusted cars and scraps all over the ground. I forgot to mention that for some reason, I decided to go in the house in the evening, dusk to be precise. I had less than an hour to take photographs before darkness settled in. So, I entered the house from the back because it was the only part of the house with an open door. The floor was littered with papers, overturned chairs, and a lot of other rubble. I took some photos in the entrance and made my way inside. I went into the room that was the furthest into this part of the house. The first floor had 2 sections of the house that could not be reached from inside. This room had an overturned couch, a fireplace, and a littered floor. This room gave me very strong thoughts about entering it. I don't know what it was, but there was something that felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. But I entered, and I stood at the far right corner behind the couch and aimed my camera towards the fireplace. The light on my camera flickered on and off rapidly, and my camera refused to take the photo. I tried and tried, but my camera would not take it. Instead, I stood there and watched as the room went from total darkness to light as the camera flickered on and off. Afraid of what might appear, I left the room and stood looking into it from beyond. From there, I went to the upstairs to where a previous fire left the entire floor naked to the sky. This is where I noticed something odd. The house's main floor, as I've said before, was divided into 2 parts. Neither could be reached from inside the main floor. You either had to leave the house, go around and enter through another door, or, as I just had learned, you had to go upstairs, cross over to the other side, and take another set of stairs down. Unfortunately, the stairs that led to the other side of the house was blocked by fallen timber, but this layout of the house was very, very odd. It did not make any sense. So, I went back downstairs and went around to the other side of the house to enter. I found an open window and pulled myself up onto the ledge. I froze right on the spot, staring deep into this part of the house. I have no idea what it was, but something was telling me to stay the hell away from the house. I felt this deep fear, this huge warning of not to enter this part of the house. So I pulled myself back down and walked away. Now, here's the interesting part. I've dreamt much of this house before I had gone to visit it. In my dreams, there was another entrance to the house, or another part of the house, a tunnel carved into the house from the ground. As I walked away, I saw it, about 50 feet from the house. 5 feet down the portal of it, cemented there, lay another path wide enough to crawl through that pointed to the house. Now, you can believe this or not, everything I've said is true. Just thought you would like to hear it. In the late 1970s, I attended college in New York State, around the Finger Lakes. The building I describe was first built in the 1890s. Since we were in the middle of the first oil crisis, students who remained on campus spent the short winter term in the old main dorm to conserve energy. As it happened, some friends and I were assigned a large, empty room on the top floor. It was 4 floors up and 1 below the attic, and 1 end slanted along the roof line. The room had been primarily used for storage. The gloomy winter sun had a hard time shining through the one ice-upped window facing the lake. Dark as it was, we cheerfully shoved a desk to one side and slept on the floor to give us more room. We were having a good time camping out and weren't inclined to do much schoolwork until our papers were due. After 3 weeks or so, a winter storm was approaching, so we decided to stock up on necessities and have a little party just amongst ourselves. I'd like to say that we were all sober as judges and went to bed early after saying our prayers. However, it being the late 70s, we indulged in smoke and alcohol. We had the stereo up loud, but the music couldn't completely cover the growing sound of the wind. Our window was frosted up, and a tree branch scratched the glass. Every now and then, someone wondered whether we'd be snowed in. Someone said we would at least be able to get down on the tree. Eventually, we turned in. Unsurprisingly, that night, I had a very spooky dream. A woman hovered over me and was trying to say something to me. God knows I tried to understand her, but her fluid outlines and vivid colors made me feel a bit queasy. I woke up, certain she was still in the room. I saw nothing, just the shadow of the tree limb swaying outside. Too much party, I thought to myself, and went back to sleep. We were quiet the next morning. I suppose it was due to too much of a good thing the night before. The snowdrifts were impressive, as the wind had been so wicked, but the sun was out, and the sky was clear, and the snow was pristine. It was so much different than the storm that I felt up to sharing my spooky dream. It seems that two of the others had strange dreams as well. Since we all dreamed different things, I was certain nothing occult had happened. I was very relieved, since we still had 3 weeks to live in that room. Being a Florida girl, I was still curious about snow still, and wanted to have a look around. I dragged a willing soul with me, and we make a quick trek around the yard. Finally, I wanted to see about our tree. My companion was bitching about the cold, and she ran into my back. When she saw why I had stopped, she said, "Son of a gun." You may have guessed by now that there was no branch, no tree, no vegetation within 15 yards of our window, and nothing was 4 stories high. We dug in the snow a bit to see whether it had fallen. Nope, no trunk, no hidden limbs in the snow. We ran up to the room to look out and make certain we had the right window. When we heated off the frost with a hairdryer and we looked down and saw nothing but our tracks, every one of us marched back down to try and find our tree. Nothing. We went back upstairs and talked a bit to get over the shock. We were all skittish, but managed to sleep in the room, but with our mattresses shoved much closer together. After that, we never mentioned much. Why bother? There was no rational explanation. I'm just glad I wasn't the only witness. That would have been crazy making. Hi, I live in the United Kingdom and have had a few ghostly experiences. My first was when I was about 7 or 8, just after my dog had passed away. He used to sit with me at the top of the stairs when I was younger, as if to protect me from falling down. He would let me be till I made it all the way up or down. After he was gone, I used to sit on the same top stair, pining for my best friend. One evening, I watched as a cat walked from the dining room door, which was open, through the living room door, which was shut. This wasn't the only time I met the cat. I always slept with the door shut to my bedroom, but felt a cat pat and paw its way to getting comfortable on my bed. I also remember it purring as well. We did have a cat at the time, so I thought it was her. I reached down to stroke what I thought was my cat. Instead, there was a small indent in my mattress. When I turned the light on, there was nothing there. My door was still shut, and my cat wasn't in the room. During my teens a few times, I woke to find my light on and television turned on. This stopped when I moved out of the family home while I went to college. I suppose more disturbingly is what has been happening to me for the last few years. In 3 different properties I've lived in, my bed has been shaken. The first couple of times it happened, I was really scared, but have gotten used to it now and have accepted it. If I had the courage, I would ask it what it wants, but it's never hurt me, and I believe it is there just to let me know it's looking out for me. Whenever it has happened, it is usually when I've been upset. It happened after I broke up with my ex-girlfriend, for example. I lived in a small, cramped apartment in a building that was built in the 1940s in Kokomo, Indiana. I've heard several ghost stories from my friends and whatnot, but I'd never taken any of them to heart until I saw firsthand a ghost in my very own house. I had never truly felt at ease in my own apartment. It had always seemed as though something else had resided besides my boyfriend and I. What got me thinking was the fact that whenever I opened the front door, I saw a faint shadow of a person walk into the kitchen, which was to the left. Lighting can create that, but no matter if the light source were emitting from the right, left, behind me, or even not at all, I always saw a faint shadow of a person walk into the kitchen. I really never thought much more than it being a light trick, though I was creeped out that I saw a shadow, even though there would be no light at all. After a while, I rarely noticed it. Things changed on January 19th, 2004. I was on my computer in my living room. To the left of me was a walk-in closet. We always kept the doors to the closet open. I was the only one home. It was nighttime, and the lights were on in the house. I stared at the screen, not paying attention to anything else, when the lighting in the room changed and got dimmer. It repeated this for a few seconds, and I chalked it up to the snowstorm outside. A few minutes go by, and then, to my left, I see what appeared to be a person outside my field of vision. I wear glasses, so I don't see way off to the side too well. Anyway, I turned my head, and I saw, as clear as anyone could ever see, a young man walk straight into my closet and then disappear. I remember exactly what he had looked like. About 6 feet tall, short, straight blonde hair. He never looked over at me. I only saw him from the side as he disappeared into my closet. Strange, I know, and I could not make sense of it either. I was so scared that I immediately jumped up from my chair and drove to my mother's house, where I stayed for a couple of days. Later on, after I had moved out a month later, I found out from my landlord that the last resident was a young man who had committed suicide by hanging himself with a noose in the walk-in closet. I wonder to this day, why did I see him? What was the purpose? I don't know if I'll ever know, but I've been both fascinated and frightened by my experience, and from the day it has happened, it has always captivated me. The following happened in Pocatello, Idaho, and Basalt, Idaho. In 1981, I witnessed my sister, Linda Diane Smith, being kidnapped from her home while babysitting me. Because of my sister's financial and social status at the time, the police treated her kidnapping as a runaway, or a joke. They thought I made up the kidnapping to cover for my sister. Many weeks passed, and still no contact from my sister. Finally, my mother took me to a hypnotist, and I was able to recall almost everything that happened that night. Then and only then did the police treat her disappearance as suspicious. Later that summer, after my mother finished school, we all decided to move in with my maternal grandparents. We had only been there for a short while when one night, lying in bed, I heard someone calling my name from outside. I got up and went outside across the street, and there, standing alone, was my sister. I thought to myself, this isn't real, but she came over to me and hugged me and told me not to worry about her anymore because she was okay. It was obvious that I wouldn't be able to see her again. I loved my sister dearly, and being only 9 years old at the time, I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or not. However, when I woke up the next morning, thinking I dreamt the whole scenario, I got out of bed and noticed my feet were all muddy and dirty. I never went outside without my shoes on before, mainly because the spring before my sister was taken, she had stepped on a bee, and I didn't want the same thing to happen to me. In May of 1982, a few months after seeing my sister, some kids were playing on a hill nearby. It was actually where we used to live, and they discovered some human remains, mainly a skull and a few other fragments. They were later identified as my sister, Linda Diane Smith. Her kidnapping and murder remain a mystery to this day. Although I am still uncertain of what I saw that night, I would like to think it was my sister coming to say goodbye. I grew up in Franklin, in a college city, 30 miles south of Indianapolis. Shortly after my mother died in 1980, my sister, stepbrother, and his wife came up for a weekend to visit with my father and me to go through some of my mom's items. After they left the following Sunday, I had laid down for a nap. During the course of the nap, I was jarred awake by a presence. I saw the curtains to a window, looking out onto the street close by themselves, and saw the shadow of a woman sitting on my bed. I knew immediately it was my mother, but was not the least bit frightened by it. She was merely checking on me to make sure I was okay. Several years later, the house was up for sale. As the final sale details were being worked out, I'd stepped in to visit for a little bit. While laying on the floor, reading the local newspaper, I smelled the aroma of perfume, and all of a sudden, heavy footsteps down the hall. I know it wasn't my heart palpitating, as I would have felt that right off the bat. Mom's favorite perfume was Chanel No. 5, and Dad was known for his heavy steps, even on level ground. Again, I was not frightened, as I knew they were just checking in. Another time took place when I got home from work. I was living in an apartment on the west side of Indianapolis. I'd gotten in from work during a fierce electric storm. I happened to look over at an end table where my dad's picture was and noticed it had an extra glow about it. Again, he was just checking in. They haven't visited me anymore lately. I guess they must like what they see. Guys, I'm so hurt. We had a plan. You told me this would work. And now what? We're reduced to frickin' peanuts? Guys, oh hell no. I'm living tonight. Phantom will take off his pants tonight. No more tears. I'm gonna be a star. Okay, guys, that was my monologue that I asked on Twitter and Instagram if you guys wanted me to say that, and I felt really compelled. And now I embarrass myself wholeheartedly, and just for your entertainment and your pleasure. At your guys' pleasure, I can do anything that's possible, including milking my own esophagus. I don't know what that means. Hey guys, anyway, thanks so much again for tuning in. Love these stories. I actually really like the kidnapping story a lot. It was really sad. It was really morbid, but at the same time, it was a beautiful, sign off way of saying, oh, I'm still here. And I thought that was really sweet. So guys, comment, like, share, and subscribe. I love you guys. I'm signing out right now, and I'll see you in the next video. Oh, and video Tuesday, just so you guys know.